LoveLore Library. Chapter 350. Even though she was over 50 years old, Murong-yun's beauty was well known in the capital. Even at her age, she was still a stunning beauty that no young girl in the capital could compare to. Today, our Fu has an honored guest. Even the tea set is a high-quality golden and wooden cup, bestowed by His Majesty. Lady Murong, aren't you looking down on the things bestowed by His Majesty, smashing them just like that? As soon as Shin Yueji's words fell, Murong-yun's angry face immediately changed color. The golden wooden cup on the ground had been broken in half. Although it was called a golden wooden cup, it was actually made of golden glaze. Even the Gu family had never received such an honor. This was bestowed to Shinhe by Feng Jiuqing in front of all the civil and military officials when Shinhe returned from the victorious war half a month ago and the foreign envoys had presented them as tribute. Normally, Shinhe liked to drink a few cups of wine with this small golden wooden cup. It looked exquisite and was also a kind of pleasing to the eye. Murong-yun's own upbringing was extremely good. Even if she had long seen the deliberate provocation of the mother and daughter of the Shin family, she quickly restrained the threatening cold air on her face and smiled instead. She personally bent down to pick up the broken golden wooden cup and carefully placed it on the table. This is indeed my fault. I didn't know that this was a gift from the Emperor. When the Emperor comes, I will personally ask for forgiveness from him. It's okay. As the saying goes, the ignorant are not guilty. As long as Madame Murong can vent her anger, it's fine. My daughter and I have the same temperament. We say what we want to say. We don't like to beat around the bush. Your son is the one who should die, Shin Yueji coughed softly. Shin Qiu reacted and quickly changed her words. Look at my mouth. Why can't I say polite words? My daughter, help me say it. The people of the general's mansion have also heard of your son's tragic death and we are deeply grieved. I hope that Lady Murong and Prime Minister Gu will not grieve too much. I believe that when third young Master Gu's spirit in heaven sees this, he will also feel uneasy and will not be able to leave peacefully. Is right. You still have 2 sons. It's not a big deal for one to die. There was another long period of silence in the air. Shin Qiu didn't feel that she had said anything wrong. Murong-yun didn't speak, so she just drank tea. After a long time, Murong-yun's voice was squeezed out from between her teeth. I will not let the matter of Mingqi's tragic death rest. Even if I have to turn the capital upside down, I will definitely find the culprit and hack him into pieces. Let him be buried with my son. I heard that in order to find third young master's murderer, Madame Murong sealed off the entire Phoenix Tower. Murong-yun narrowed her eyes when she heard that. The atmosphere in the lobby became strange again. Gu Wei coughed lightly and said with a dignified expression, I was the one who ordered it to be sealed. Ming-Chi had met with such a big incident in Phoenix House. Were the people of Phoenix House all freeloading? You can't even see who tied him up. Oh. Shin Yueji smiled faintly. Prime Minister Gu is really one rank higher than others. It's really pitiful for the hundreds of people in the Phoenix Pavilion. It's hard for them to feed their families. Gu Wei sneered, not letting them die with me is already the greatest mercy I can show them. Chapter 351. I don't know which inn in the capital can offer more money than the Phoenix Brothel. The waiters of the Phoenix Brothel are all proud and arrogant. If they offer less money, they might not even be interested. Prime Minister said that not only will they have a hard time making ends meet in the future, I'm afraid that they might not even be able to survive in the future. Shin Yueji held her chin and looked distressed. Prime Minister Gu is deeply loved by the people in the capital. For the sake of his own son, he has implicated so many innocent people. When the time comes, the people will gossip. When that time comes. She spread her hands and said helplessly, the image that the Gu family has built up to love the people will be in vain and will collapse. What did you say? Although Shin Yueji's words were unpleasant to the ears, it was indeed reasonable. Gu Wei, in particular, stood up on the spot. In the meantime, he saw Murong Yun's cold gaze and quickly sat back down. Even the way she looked at Murong Yun was filled with fear. Yun, I didn't know things would turn out like this. At that time, I was only thinking about avenging Ming Qi and finding the murderer. It wasn't true. Murong Yun's eyes were filled with fear. Murong Yun didn't look at him, but she didn't hide the disgust in her eyes. Whether it was for Qi, or for your own selfish motives, you know it yourself. There's no need to explain it to me. Yun, it's been so many years, don't you believe me? Sigh. Seeing that the two of them were quarreling, Shin Yueji interrupted them. Madam Murong, please don't pick our general's mansion to quarrel with you too. My father and mother love each other very much. Don't pass this on to my father and mother, or you will suffer retribution. Shin Yueji, seeing that you are the imperial concubine, I won't lower myself to your level. But you must remember your own status. You are just an imperial concubine. If the Gu family is not willing, then you won't be an imperial concubine for long. Shin Qiu, with her hot temper, immediately stood up when she heard this. She almost cursed it out loud. She, Shin Qiu, and Shin He were not dead yet. How could Gu Wei step on her head? Even if they were dead. Just based on the troops that her Shin family had secretly cultivated, it was enough for Shin Yueji to sit firmly in the position of an imperial consort and not be shaken for 100 years. Even the emperor could not. Shin Qiu didn't even have time to retort. Then, she heard a gentle male voice. Amidst the gentleness, there was a dignified pressure that could not be refused. Oh. We still don't know that without our verbal orders, the position of the imperial consort can be abolished by an official. Feng Jiuqing's voice came from outside the door. He was dressed in a scholarly white robe that made him look as handsome as a clear river. His facial features were so natural that it was impossible to look away from him. Especially that pair of gentle and affectionate eyes. At this moment, no emotions could be seen in them, whether they were angry or calm. The depths of the darkness were so deep that no one could understand what they were looking at. When Gu Wei saw him, he was startled. He immediately got up and saluted. This subject Gu Wei greets the emperor. Long live the emperor. Murong Yun and Gu Mujue bowed as well. When Shin Qiu saw this, she naturally did not dare to stand still with Shin Yueji. Just as Shin Yueji was about to bend over and kneel down, the man's strong and large hands firmly caught her hand. He took the opportunity to pull her towards the high seat and let her sit on his lap. Chapter 352. Shin Qiu tactfully got up from the ground and went to the guest seat below to sit down. The moment he raised his head, he saw Shin Yueji in the arms of the young emperor. Gu Wei coldly narrowed his eyes. I heard that your majesty returned to the capital today, so this official specially rushed over to invite your majesty. Beloved official Gu. Your majesty. He casually took a piece of pastry from the tea table and teased the little person in his arms. When she opened her mouth to bite, Feng Jiuqing took back the pastry. After a few times, the little woman angrily turned her face away and he took a full piece of pastry and pushed it into her mouth. He only stuffed her cheeks full and glared at him with big eyes. Feng Jiuqing couldn't help but laugh when he saw how she was angry but didn't dare to vent. He couldn't help but reach out and poke her puffed-up cheeks. His tone was gentle and gentle. Do I need to report to my beloved official where I want to stay? Your Majesty. Zhen was resting just now when I heard that Prime Minister Gu brought Madame Murong to the general's residence in a grandiose manner. At this point, he smiled, not knowing whether it was funny or a sneer. His gentle laughter inexplicably made one feel a chill down one's spine, revealing a cold intent from top to bottom. Gu Wei knew that he was in the wrong, so he respectfully got up and kneeled on the ground. This official is worried that your majesty will not stay in the general's residence well. Your majesty knows that General Shin is after all a military general, and it is inevitable that there will be some mistakes in terms of accommodation. Your majesty is the son of heaven and needs to think of everything thoroughly and be well prepared. This official is afraid that General Shin will treat your majesty poorly, so... I heard that old General Shin is seriously ill and worried about your majesty's health, so this official wife came with Prime Minister Gu to invite your majesty to the Prime Minister's residence. To put it bluntly, Prime Minister Gu and Madame Murong are looking down on my father because he is an uncouth man. I admit that my father is not that meticulous, but it is not like there are no women in the general's residence. My mother is meticulous, right? Are the maids in the residence also meticulous? Ben Gong is not much different. Your majesty will stay in the general's residence for a day. Could it be that Madame Murong is worried that your majesty will lose weight in one night? That's right. Shin Qiu snorted in dissatisfaction. We can't even bear to eat the big pig trotters cooked by the kitchen on normal days. They are specially given to the emperor. Feng Jiuqing, who was drinking tea, was caught off guard by Shin Qiu's words. He nearly spat out the tea. Seeing this, Shin Yueji quickly patted his back and stared at Shin Qiu. Mother, look at you. Don't talk about the big pig trotters every time you see a guest. What kind of identity does the emperor have? What haven't I seen before? Just a glance at this big fish and meat is enough for me in the palace. And your words, Shin Yueji wanted to say that but because Murong Yun and Gu Wei were present, wouldn't saying it be a slap to Shin Qiu's face. Now that they were a family, she didn't want to make them happy. It's fine if you talk to Madame Murong and the others, but don't talk nonsense in front of His Majesty. Right, Your Majesty. Feng Jiuqing looked at her helplessly. His slender fingers touched the tip of her eyebrows lightly. You. He covered his mouth and coughed lightly. All right, I heard that third young Master Gu was assassinated in Phoenix Restaurant. Now that the Prime Minister's residence is searching for the murderer in the whole city, I will not go to your place. I will stay in the general's residence for a day and return tomorrow. Your Majesty, Gu Wei still wanted to say something. During that time, Murong Yun glanced at him. He could only swallow all the words that were on the tip of his tongue unwillingly. Since it is Your Majesty's wish, I will go back first. Chapter 353. Yun, listen to me, I. Slap. Outside the general's mansion, Gu Wei could feel Murong Yun's anger the moment he left the main hall. He quickly caught up with her and barely managed to catch up to her when he walked out of the general's mansion. He was panting heavily behind her, but before he could finish his sentence, a slap came towards him and stunned him. He covered his face and stared at Murong Yun's noble and elegant face. Yun, Gu Wei, are you finding me more and more annoying now? Yun, what do you mean? Why would I dislike you? You know that the moment I married you, I told you that I won't allow you to interfere with anything related to my past. You, on the other hand, in the past 20 years, you've destroyed so much for me in the dark. Now, you've finally found a suitable reason to get rid of the Phoenix Pavilion, my last wish, haven't you? If it wasn't for the Phoenix Pavilion, Ming Qi wouldn't have been in trouble. I'm doing this to avenge Ming Qi and find the culprit as soon as possible. Gu Wei, you're so powerful in the imperial court that even the nobles and the people of the pugilistic world are afraid of you. Isn't it easy for you to find the culprit? Why did you have to seal the Phoenix Pavilion? Slap. Another slap came flying over. Gu Mujue furrowed her brows and stepped forward. She looked at the indifferent Murong-yun and said, "Mother, this is the general's mansion. Father is the head of the civil and military officials after all. If outsiders see you hitting him like this, what would happen to father's face?" "Feel." Murong-yun laughed sarcastically as if she had thought of something funny. Her gaze was full of sarcasm. "Gu Wei, since that night 20 years ago, do you still know what it means to be courteous, righteous, and honorable? In the end, you just can't forget that man." After swallowing her anger for so many years, this woman was really made of stone. Her heart was very hard. No matter how much effort he put in, no matter how hard he tried to please her, Gu Wei realized that he had never taken a single step into her heart. Because of her, he never had a concubine in his life. She was the only one in the Prime Minister's mansion. When he was young and vigorous, every time they had sex, she would close her eyes and never open them to look at him. Even when they were in the throes of making love, she had never made a single sound. He wrapped his arms around her shoulders and forced himself to look at the pair of eyes that were filled with hatred for her. "You have to remember, that man is already dead. He died 20 years ago. He betrayed the relationship between you two. He betrayed you. In what way have I not treated you well? I'll give you everything you want. I'll never have a concubine in my life. I'll only marry you. Even if I'm not in your heart, I'll still spoil you and love you. I've always repeatedly persuaded myself in my heart that there's still a long time. One day, you'll be moved, and one day, you'll run into my arms again. But I've waited for more than 20 years, and we've already had 3 children. Tell me, what else do you want from me? I treat you wholeheartedly, but do I have any place in your heart?" Chapter 354. I want to. You're the one who doesn't want to. You're so considerate and magnanimous. Countless beauties are sent to my room. Do you think that with them, I won't be with you? That I won't touch you if I forget you? Gu Wei suddenly laughed. "My wife, from the moment we married, she was so considerate. She was gentle, magnanimous, educated and reasonable, and worked hard to help the Gu family grow." Gu Wei laughed until tears came out of his eyes. He didn't get on the carriage but staggered forward alone. "It's been so many years have passed, but in your heart, I'm still nothing. All along, I've been the evil person who forced you to have a child prematurely, the one who prevented you from being able to spend the rest of your life with the man you love." After 3 steps, Gu Wei stopped. He did not turn back to look at her, but his back was inexplicably dispirited. Tell me, if it wasn't for that night, if you weren't pregnant with Gu Yuqin, no matter what that man did, you'd forgive him and be with him?" "Really?" "Yes." There was no consideration. Murong-yun looked at his back and said resolutely, "Even if he had forgotten me, even if he had broken his promise to me, I would still choose to forgive him. Because I love him. What about me? From the beginning to the end, I only had you in my heart. I married you cleanly, and never had another woman. Even so, you've never loved me, right? Gu Wei, do you understand love?" "Ha ha ha, I don't understand love. I've loved you for more than 20 years, without asking for anything in return. I've been wholeheartedly for you, and you say that I don't understand love." Gu Wei threw his head back and laughed, then strode away. He doesn't understand love. The woman he loved actually said that he didn't understand love. Then, who was the sacrifice he had made for these 20 years? Wasn't it love? If it wasn't love, Gu Wei's heart strangely throbbed with pain. He closed his eyes, but after a few steps, his vision suddenly went black and he fainted. "Father!" Murong-yun calmly looked at his fainted body on the ground. In that instant, he seemed to have aged several decades. She didn't step forward to help him up. There wasn't the slightest hint of heartache or worry in her eyes. As she watched Gu Mujue help him into the carriage, she pursed her lips and smiled silently. If not for that night 20 years ago. Even if that night had happened 20 years ago, if she hadn't been pregnant with Gu Yuqin, she would still have followed that man without hesitation. But, if it wasn't for her. If it wasn't for her. If it wasn't for her, 2 streams of tears flowed down her pale cheeks. Almost 20 years of abuse could not erase the hatred in her heart. She did not deserve to live in this world. She was unnecessary. Every time she saw her, she wanted to strangle her with her own hands. It was all because of her that she could not be with the man she loved. That was why she had married Gu Wei, a man she did not love. Mother, what you said to father today was too harsh. After comforting Gu Wei, Gu Mujue got out of the carriage and looked at her with disapproval. Murong Yun only closed her eyes. Her face, which did not have any makeup on, did not age much because of the changes over the years. She exuded an aura of purity that was as pure as the heavens. She walked past him and said, "You go back first, I'll walk back." Chapter 355. Does your majesty also think that my mother's words are vulgar? After seeing off Gu Mu and his wife, Shen Yueji sat on the round chair and lowered her head. Feng Zhiqing was pinching the pastry with his finger and was about to put it into his mouth. Hearing her sigh, he slowed down and put the pastry on the plate. Why do you say so? For example, what mother said to your majesty today, Madame Murong would not say it. No matter how vulgar the words are, Madame Murong can make them beautiful. Holding her chin, Shen Yueji looked at him eagerly. What kind of mother teaches what kind of daughter? I feel more and more that I can't pretend anymore and will soon show my true colors. At that time, the girl cried, "Your Majesty, please don't mind my vulgar words." The man heard her words and chuckled in a low voice. This laughter was particularly harsh to Shen Yueji. She glared at him fiercely. What are you laughing at? Feng Zhiqing stopped laughing and slowly put the pastry that he had just pinched with his finger for a long time into his mouth. Since ancient times, most of the imperial concubines are arrogant and domineering. Even the concubines below the imperial concubine know how to be tactful and polite, virtuous and generous. Hearing the meaning of his words, Shen Yueji slowly climbed up from the round chair and walked towards the young emperor with narrowed eyes. Your Majesty, did you know my temperament a long time ago, so you directly made me an imperial concubine? The positions of the 4 imperial concubines in the harem have long been filled. Even if the empress does not have Gu Yueyin, according to the talent of the imperial concubine, it is difficult for her to be qualified. When your father talked to me about you entering the palace, I really thought about it seriously. After thinking for a long time, I felt that the position of imperial concubine is very suitable for you. This time, Shen Yueji did not know whether she should cry or laugh. Indeed, imperial concubines did not need to care about so many rules. Imperial concubines had been arrogant and domineering since ancient times and did not put people in their eyes. She only needed to walk in the harem and no one dared to make trouble for her. Thinking of this, Shen Yueji's whole body collapsed again. The man stretched out his big hand and took her into his arms. Don't sigh anymore. I think this is exactly what makes imperial concubine different. Your Majesty's difference is that imperial concubine's words are vulgar. If your Majesty wants this kind of woman, this concubine can find you a bunch of them. The man rubbed the space between his eyebrows as if he had a headache. You alone are enough for me. I can't have another one. Climbing out of his embrace, Shen Yueji carefully tidied up her clothes. The sky is about to turn dark. I know that your Majesty didn't eat much just now. I will order people to prepare some vegetables. After your Majesty eats, you can have a good night's sleep and return to the capital tomorrow. Feng Zhiqing nodded and didn't say anything else. He watched as Shen Yueji got up from his embrace and left. Her slender figure disappeared around the corner. A pair of gentle and smiling eyes suddenly turned cold. His black pupils were dyed red, and his pitch-black pupils were no longer the same color as before. They were bright red, as if they were covered in a layer of fresh blood. He pulled out a handkerchief and wiped the hand he had used to touch the woman's cheek. It wasn't until the skin on his hand was scraped that his eyes, which were so red that they looked like they were about to burst into blood, slowly returned to their original state. Opening his eyes once more, Feng Zhiqing lowered his head to look at his torn palm and fingertips, which were bleeding profusely. He frowned slightly. Chapter 356. Shen Yueji didn't personally serve the meal that was prepared for the night. Instead, she ordered double happiness to deliver it to Feng Zhiqing. She stood alone in the back garden, gazing at the cold moon in the sky. Leaning against the corridor, she seemed to be thinking about something. "Miss Shen." A familiar voice sounded behind her. Shen Yueji didn't look back. She just tightened her clothes. Soon, the man behind her put a coat over her. She looked back in surprise. Because she didn't feel the presence of Mo Wushang's powerful aura, she knew that it was only Ji Chu. However, the aura of the clothes was familiar. It was Mo Wushang's. She tightened her clothes and looked back. Sure enough, it was only Ji Chu. "Where's your master? Why are you here at this time?" "Master has some personal matters to deal with. He asked me to keep an eye on you, Miss Shen." "Keep an eye on me?" Shen Yueji's mouth twitched. "What's there to look at? Is he worried that I'll make him a cuckold?" "Not necessarily." Ji Chu nodded in agreement. "After all, Miss Shen has already made the emperor a cuckold. Master asked me to keep an eye on you." Hearing this, Shen Yueji was overjoyed. "If you're so worried that I'll make him a cuckold, why didn't you come personally? Master usually hides in the dark. If Miss Shen found out that he came personally, he wouldn't be able to catch us in the act." Shen Yueji was speechless. Shen Yueji narrowed her eyes and looked at the man in front of her seriously. Ji Chu's scalp went numb under her stare. He waved his hand and smiled. "Miss Shen, my master really can't come. Moreover, I came here to inform Miss Shen of something." "Speak." "The general's residence has to pass by the Broken Heart Cliff. If we set off from there, we can save a lot of time and return to the palace as soon as possible. Moreover, Master found many of Feng Zhiqing's trusted secret guards lying in ambush near the Broken Heart Cliff." Oh. Shen Yueji couldn't be more familiar with the Broken Heart Cliff. In her previous life, it was there that she was saved by Feng Zhiqing without hesitation. After that, she became even more determined to love him. Shen Yueji adjusted her clothes several times, waiting for him to continue. "This subordinate doesn't know what master means. Master only told this subordinate to bring these words to Miss Shen. At that time, Broken Intestine Cliff will also arrange for master's trusted secret guards. Whatever Miss Shen wants to do, she only needs to give the order." If Ji Chu didn't know the reason behind Feng Zhiqing's actions, Shen Yueji already had the answer in her heart. Without a doubt, he was just imitating his previous life. Sometimes, women were like this. You tried so hard to please them, but they didn't take it to heart. However, after experiencing life and death, it was easy to be moved. Even though she had long been moved by him, Feng Zhiqing's sudden act of deep emotions only made her even more determined. Thinking of this, a chill emanated from the bottom of her heart, almost penetrating her limbs and bones. The last bit of affection he had for Feng Zhiqing had been extinguished by Ji Chu's words. It turned out that he had never been willing to die for her. This was all part of his plan all along. His purpose was so obvious, it was to make her more loyal to him, so that he could use her better. And she still foolishly thought that this man was willing to sacrifice his own life for her. Chapter 357. Ji Chu looked at her lonely back and couldn't figure it out for a moment. Miss Shen, what's wrong with you? Are you unhappy that master didn't come to you? Don't worry, this subordinate dares to use my own head to guarantee to young lady Shen that master is truly wholehearted towards you. Where did your master go? This. Didn't you say that your master is devoted to me? Then I should know where he went, right? Ahem, Ji Chu almost choked on his own words. Miss Shen, in the future when master enters the palace to look for you, it is better for you to ask him yourself. This subordinate is only a servant. If I say something wrong and offend both sides, the days in the future will be very difficult. Devoted. I'm going to sleep with His Majesty soon. How can he stand it? Don't worry, Miss Shen, old General Shen and eldest young master have repeatedly promised my master that His Majesty and you will never sleep together. Also, now the whole general's mansion is full of elite secret guards of Prince Regent's mansion. Once His Majesty makes a move on Miss Shen, they will assassinate you in the dark. It's getting late, you go back first. Okay. Shen Yueji rolled her eyes at the hazy night. Now she finally knew why Mo Wushang, who had always been narrow-minded, was so well-behaved tonight. Even Shen Yueqi, who had always been noisy, was so quiet. It turned out that they had long been prepared. She tightened the cloak on her body. Before going back to the room, she thought of something, took off her clothes and put them in the corridor. Your Highness, you haven't gone to bed yet. Kong Yin's voice came from behind. Shen Yueji looked back at him and nodded. I haven't slept, and neither have you, master. Why? Could it be that you have something on your mind? Kong Yin smiled and walked through her side, standing side by side with her. I had intended to speak to her ladyship about a matter, but it seems that someone has queued up ahead of me. Even if I were to speak, I would only repeat myself. Hearing this, Shen Yueji suddenly narrowed her eyes. Her expression did not change as she smiled and said, Grandmaster Kong Yin, eavesdropping on others is not a good habit. If it is serious, it can cost one's life. Kong Yin laughed heartily. Since this old monk has pledged his allegiance to Imperial Consort, then Imperial Consort can absolutely trust in this old monk's loyalty. If Imperial Consort and the Prince Regent are together, then in the future, it will also be a safeguard for this old monk, won't it? Everyone knows that the Regent's power is equal to that of the Emperor. Although the Emperor is easy to get along with, sometimes he is too calculative and will inevitably lose the heart of his subjects. Grandmaster Kong Yin, why aren't you sleeping in the middle of the night? Are you here to show your determination? Kong Yin smiled as he shook his head. This Lao Na and Guifei are now grasshoppers on the same side. If Guifei is worried that this Lao Na will go to His Majesty to inform on you, there is no need. His Majesty knows that your Shen family has a high position and power, thus he would know about Guifei's thoughts and would not change a thing on the surface. But this old monk is different. Guifei only needs to say a few bad things about this old monk in front of His Majesty. According to His Majesty's thoughts, this old monk will definitely not live past the second day. Sigh. Chapter 358. There's no need to feel uneasy, Your Highness. You only need to remember that you and I are merely taking what we need. You get what you want, and I also get what I want. There's still a long way to go. If you really want to rely on me, I can promise you that you won't have to worry about being an official anymore. As long as you can help the people, you can stay as an official in the Foam Kingdom as long as you want, until the day you get tired of it. What do you think? Kong Yin had been waiting for her to say this. He bowed to Shen Yueji respectfully. I'm willing to do my best for your highness, until the day I die. Shin Yueji glanced at him indifferently. There are indeed many people who need to die in this world, but they are all people who deserve to die. People like us need to live, and live to the end. Yes, your highness is right. Does Master Kong Yin know martial arts? I'm well versed in both literature and martial arts. If your highness needs me, I can. If he said he was well versed in both literature and martial arts, he must be good at everything. Such a promising talent had been suppressed by Gu Wei for so many years. At this moment, Shin Yueji really wanted to laugh. Does the emperor know that you know martial arts? I have a backup plan for myself. The emperor only knows about my talent, but he doesn't know that I know martial arts. Master Kong Yin is indeed astute. Did you leave a backup plan for yourself? Hearing this, Kong Yin suddenly smiled. This old monk is many years older than your majesty. No matter how good your majesty is at scheming, this old monk is not a soft persimmon that can be pinched by anyone. There are some things that I have experienced, so I will naturally be on guard. That's good. I'll need you on the way back to the capital tomorrow. Master already knows about the Broken Heart Cliff. I need your help tomorrow. Although Shin Yueji didn't say how she wanted him to help, with Kong Yin's intelligence, how could he not guess what she wanted him to do? He bowed respectfully. Yes. When she returned to the room, the man was still sitting on the soft couch, but there was a book in his hand. Hearing the sound of the door opening, he did not even raise his head. When Jin was in the palace, Jin had heard of Gui Fei's name many times. I did not expect Gui Fei to be a person who loves to read. When she was alive, Shin Yueji was not willing to study. These books were found for her by the Double Happiness sisters when she had nothing to do. Shin Yueji didn't know if it was because she hated reading. Shin Yueji found that many of the words she knew in the past were now unfamiliar to her. She took the book to ask Shin He about the words she didn't recognize. However, he stuttered and refused to tell her. Shin Yueji secretly touched her forehead. This Chia wants to know a few more words. This way, when I stand with His Majesty, my words won't be so vulgar. When the time comes, people will laugh at me and I will lose face for His Majesty. She saw Feng Zhiqing waving to her. Shin Yueji walked over obediently. The man showed her the countless small circles in the book. Are these all words that Gui Fei doesn't recognize? Shin Yueji blinked. There were at least 10 words on the page that she didn't recognize. And the number of words on the page did not exceed 100. Shin Yueji scratched her head awkwardly. Emperor, is this Chia too stupid? Since ancient times, which woman who entered the court as a concubine didn't have a lot of writing skills? The current Feng country had long passed the era where a woman's lack of talent was a virtue. Chapter 359. He put the book aside and looked up at her. Since you don't like it, you don't have to force yourself to learn it. It's getting late and you have to get up early to go back to the palace tomorrow. Go to bed early. Oh. Shin Yueji shrugged her head. She saw the man stand up and open his arms to him. She stepped forward and helped him undress. The man was wearing a luxurious purple gold robe. The loose robe made him look a little thin. His handsome facial features and gentle temperament, coupled with the loose robe, made the man inexplicably more dignified. After taking off the man's robe, Shin Yueji hesitantly looked at his clothes inside. The man's smooth chest was as white as a painting. It was very beautiful. She used to be most moved by the man's perfect body. She would only like it if she loved it. Now she looked at it indifferently. She even subconsciously compared him with Mo Wushang. Compared to this, it's like hell. She was selfish and partial to that man. She had completely felt that the man in front of her was not comparable to him. Shin Yueji's mind was filled with thoughts of that man until her chin was lifted and she met the man's dark eyes. His warm lips curved into a smile. The man watched her blushing cheeks. "What are you thinking about, imperial consort?" Shin Yueji took a deep breath and blushed. She turned her back and said, Your Majesty. Don't take off too much. Didn't you say that tomorrow morning? If you take it off, it will be very troublesome to wear clothes tomorrow. The man stared at her red ears and was slightly stunned. Then he chuckled, walked to the bed and sat down. But before he sat on the bed, he suddenly narrowed his brows and stood up. Shin Yueji sensed such a huge commotion. She turned around and saw that the neatly folded bed had suddenly slithered out from under the blanket. It was as long as two people and as thick as an arm. Its black and yellow head was shaking its head and spitting out its tongue. Shin Yueji was shocked. Perhaps seeing the girl's pale face, Feng Jiuqing came over and held her in his arms. With a wave of his hand, the big snake on the bed fell to the ground. The man's face didn't look good. He squinted at the long sword hanging on the wall and was about to take it. Shin Yueji recognized the yellow snake as the one she had seen in Shin Yueji's backyard. Although there were many snakes like this in Shin Yueji's backyard, the one that was staring at her with glowing eyes was definitely the one that had rushed out when she opened the door. She hid behind the man and winked at the big yellow snake. The big yellow snake didn't know whether it understood or not. It stuck out its tongue at her and then slipped under the table. Under her gaze, it pushed the door with its head and crawled out. The big fat snake climbed on the ground as fast as a gust of wind. The corner of Shin Yueji's mouth twitched as she buried her head in the man's arms. Chapter 360. Feng Jiuqing ordered someone to come in and change the bedding. Before Shuangxi went out with the quilt in his arms, he stared at Shin Yueji mysteriously for a while. Sure enough, after the servant left, a big white snake came out of nowhere from the newly changed bedding. Shin Yueji didn't dare to sit on the bed because of the big yellow snake from before. Now, a white snake popped out from the changed bedding. In terms of size, it seemed to be 2 or 3 times bigger than the big yellow snake from before. And this snake looked huge, but it was not stupid at all, especially when it stared at her. It even winked at her shyly. The young emperor looked embarrassed. This time, without Shin Yueji's wink, the big white snake still knew when to stop. It jumped down from the bed, opened the door and crawled out. Shin Yueji trembled with fear. Your Majesty. Didn't you just change the bedding? Why is there a snake? She stepped out and was about to go out. I'd better ask father to prepare another room. I'm scared, I want to sleep with mother. Usually, if a woman was afraid of something, she would subconsciously think of her mother. Feng Jiuqing couldn't bear to see her helpless, scared, and pretending to be strong. He patted the back of her hand. I ordered Ji Chu to scatter some things in the room to repel the snake. When I was sleeping at night, I vaguely heard something moving here. I was in a daze and thought I heard it wrong. I didn't expect it to be a snake. Shin Yueji sobbed in the emperor's arms. Did I spend a few nights with these 2 snakes before this? Thinking of this, Shin Yueji had a lingering fear, and tears of grievance hung on her face. The emperor gently wiped away the tears in the corner of her eyes. It's the season now, flowers and trees are indeed easy to attract snakes, don't be afraid. 2 big snakes came out of the room in succession. Shen He also knew the situation here, and immediately ordered the servants to change their room. Shin Yueji was the emperor's favorite concubine in name. No matter which room she changed, she had to sleep with the emperor. How could she leave so easily? Fortunately, when Feng Jiuqing saw the girl's delicate face, he specially asked Shin Yueji to stay with Shin Qiu, and when he left tomorrow, he would ask someone to call her. Lying on Shinchio's bed, Shinhee was driven to the side and made a mattress. Shinchio lovingly hugged her daughter. At least your eldest brother has some brains. I already said that if he drove all the spiders, flies, and snakes in his backyard into your room, wouldn't he be charged with murder by the emperor? The emperor is not a fool. This thing should be done in moderation. It's hard to guarantee that he won't be suspicious. Father Shen and Mother Shen echoed each other. After talking for a long time, they realized that the original owner of the body was lying on the bed without saying a word. Shinhee got up from the ground, a little worried. He walked to the edge of the bed and touched Shin Yueji's head. Daughter, are you scared? Father and mother have seen Little White and Little Yellow with their own eyes. They have been trained by your big brother to understand human nature. When you were in the palace, they went on a hunger strike with your big brother. They almost starved to death because they missed you. Xiao Shin and Xiao Chen's father and said. Chapter 361. Mother Shin glared at him angrily and slapped his hand. Damn old thing, what are you talking about? Shin Yueji opened her eyes and looked at Mother Shin's kind face. Mother, do you trust me? What are you talking about? You are my daughter. If I don't trust you, who else should I trust? She frowned. What's wrong, You haven't said a word since you came out of your room. Did something happen? No. Shin Yueji shook her head and sat up. I just feel that it won't be too peaceful when we return to the capital tomorrow. Although His Majesty is traveling incognito, he has brought many secret guards with him. If is still worried, the general's mansion will also send more people to protect you back to the capital. Looking back at her parents' faces, Shin Yueji smiled. I want to take a risk tomorrow. No. Shinhee rejected sternly and held her hand. You can't do anything risky. Even if someone wants to do something, it should be His Majesty. Is a woman, and a woman should stay in the boudoir. Even if she gets married, she should be protected by her husband. Shin Yueji knew that it was useless to tell them her plan. She just wanted to remind them. She lay on the bed again. Father, mother, I miss Mo Wushang a little. Shinhee lay on the mattress. Now that you mention it, I miss my son-in-law a little too. For the sake of this future son-in-law, I have been very quiet. I have chased away all the young masters that I had reserved. I even want to separate His Majesty. Yes, you and His Majesty haven't slept together yet, right? Faced with such straightforward words, Shin Yueji sat up and stared at Shinchio for a long time. Mother, you? Mother heard from eunuch Gao that His Majesty had also stayed in your Phoenix Palace for a few days during the month that I've been in the palace. You and His Majesty haven't. Shin Yueji held her forehead as she felt a headache coming on. No. Although His Majesty stayed with me in the same palace, he always went to review the memorials at night. Moreover, he would read them until dawn. He had already left for morning court before I woke up. Shinchio stroked her chest. That's good. My daughter is still innocent. Mother can see that the Prince Regent is infatuated with you. Don't act recklessly. It's better to treat the Prince Regent better. A person like the Emperor is not suitable for you. Mother feels upset just by looking at him. Your mother is right. You can have many husbands, but your man can't. He must be devoted to you. When the time comes, you will accept the Prince Regent. Father will make a backyard for you. If any man is disobedient, you can divorce him. If he's obedient, you can give him a promotion and let him help you take care of your backyard. You can enjoy yourself outside as much as you want. The corner of Shin Yueji's mouth twitched. According to the Prince Regent's character, Father, are you sure he won't kill those men? Shinhee scratched his head and thought seriously for a while. That's true. It seems like I can only raise them secretly. As the saying goes, the flower in the house is not as wild as the hiss. Madam Shin threw a pillow at him. Shinhee immediately covered his head and lay on the ground, gasping. Shinhee, tell me clearly today. What do you mean by the flower in the house is not as fragrant as the wild flower? So you've been keeping other women outside, haven't you? Chapter 362. Shinhee grits his teeth in pain and stares at her tough look. I'll come back after the morning court. One day is so long, and I spend so much time on you. In addition to leading the troops to fight, I don't even go out to drink when they ask me to. How can I raise a woman? The man complains. Shinchio knows that she is at a disadvantage. She smiles guiltily. I know you are doing it for G.'s sake, but who told you to say it as if you have done it? If I don't hit you, who else can I hit? Shinhee covers his painful head and lies on the ground with his back to the mother and daughter in a huff without saying anything. Sleeping until the latter half of the night, Shinchio reckoned that Shin Yueji had fallen asleep. Shinchio sneakily crawled down from the bed and sat on Shinhee's body. She kissed his face that was also not asleep. Baby, I was wrong. Can you forgive me? Who told you to speak blindly? Shinhee covers his face that she kisses and turns over to press her under his body. You have no conscience. You only know to get down now. You are not serious. Keep your voice down. Our daughter is asleep. Don't wake her up. Shinhee is busy taking off her clothes. It doesn't matter. Our daughter has been sleeping since she was a child. There is no sound on the ground. Just don't shout later. Shinchio's face turns red because of her explicit words. However, he is too smooth in taking off her clothes. Shinhee is about to take off his pants and go in. Subconsciously, he heard Shinchio's words and glanced at the bed. This one look almost scared him to the point that he was crippled. He sees that Shin Yueji has got out of bed at some time. At the moment, she is wearing a piece of clothing. She is a step away from them, swinging her legs and watching them affectionately. No one knows how long she has been watching. The man lies on her for a long time without any reaction. Shinchio also slowly notices something. Following Shinhee's sight, she sees Shin Yueji sitting on the bed. She feels ashamed and buries her head in Shinhee's arms. You damn old thing, I told you not to come tonight. G.'r is sleeping, but you have to make such a big noise. Now, how is she going to face others? Shinhee hurriedly tidied up his pants and helped Shinchio put on her clothes. He protected her in his arms and then looked at the girl sitting on the bed. Daughter, you're not asleep. When he said this, a trace of embarrassment could be seen on his face. Seeing his embarrassed look, Shin Yueji nodded and said, Yes, I heard the noise and thought that there were snakes in Dad and Mom's room again, so I woke up. Seeing their embarrassment, Shin Yueji draped a coat over herself. You guys continue. I can't sleep. I want to go out and take a look. Where are you going in the middle of the night, G.'r? Shinchio's head popped out from Shinhee's embrace. Shin Yueji had an aggrieved look on her face. Chapter 363. The secret guard dutifully sent her to the door of the regent's mansion and put her down. Originally, he planned to send the miss directly to the regent's bed, but the regent's mansion was heavily guarded. He was considerate, but he didn't have the guts. The person who opened the door was an old housekeeper. Seeing a beautiful woman knocking on the door in the middle of the night, he subconsciously categorized her as that kind of woman. However, after Shin Yueji revealed her name, the old man's attitude took a 180-degree turn and he respectfully welcomed her in. Miss Shen, this is the residence of the regent. I won't accompany you in. The brightly lit house in front of her was huge, several times larger than the Phoenix Palace where she lived. The luxurious exterior decoration was even more luxurious than the Imperial Palace. Although the regent's mansion was not as big as the Imperial Palace, everything here, including the trees and flowers, was as prosperous and expensive as the Imperial Palace. Along the way, Shen Yueji finally understood how rich Mo Wuxiang was. She didn't pay much attention to these vanity things, but looked at the room that was still lit in the middle of the night. Doesn't your regent sleep in the middle of the night? The old man hesitated. Maybe it's because there are guests in the mansion tonight, so the regent slept a little later than usual. The old butler was afraid that if he said too much, Miss Shen would think that the regent had some eccentricities. According to Ji Chu, the regent had been very fond of this daughter of the Shen family recently. The old butler definitely didn't dare to tell her how the regent had lived for more than a month after the death of the late empress. Guests. Shen Yueji frowned. What kind of guests can make him stay up so late and discuss with guests? Shen Yueji's frown deepened. She walked past the old man and pushed the door to go in. Discussing business in the middle of the night. It couldn't be a woman, right? As Shen Yueji expected, the door was pushed open, and a delicate fragrance came from the room. Her vision swayed and she saw a woman in a revealing red dress. She was very close to Mo Wuxiang. Although she wasn't hanging onto his body, they were separated by a fist. As long as he stretched out his hand, he would be able to pull her slender waist into his embrace. The woman was very beautiful, and it would not be an exaggeration to describe her as a demoness who could bring disaster to a country. Her eyebrows were curved like willow leaves, and her skin was as fair as powder. Her eyes were big, brighter than crystal grapes, and very seductive. Her hand was still in the position of pushing the door open. She stood outside the door and looked at the two people inside. For some reason, she felt that the two of them standing together looked especially compatible. She didn't know what it would look like if she stood with Mo Wuxiang, but after seeing them, Shen Yueji realized that they were more suitable than her. At this moment, she couldn't tell what she was feeling in her heart. She just felt that her heart was in pain. Her expression was also indifferent. She didn't want to speak, and her entire person was sullen. She didn't say anything. Before leaving, she didn't forget to close the door for them, and then turned to leave. She shouldn't have come. She shouldn't have subconsciously thought of Mo Wuxiang when she saw her father and mother being intimate. She shouldn't have felt awkward when sleeping with Shen Qiu, and subconsciously wanted him to hug her to sleep. Chapter 364. The moment the door was closed, she couldn't see the expression on the man's face. But before she could take a few steps, a cold wind swept behind her. The next second, she was held tightly in the man's arms. Shen Yueji didn't struggle. She sniffed and said, "I'll give you a chance to explain. Give me a reasonable explanation. If I'm satisfied, I'll forgive you." Mo Wuxiang carried her back to the room. The woman was still standing in the distance. Her red clothes were bold and revealing, and her eyes were fixed on Shen Yueji. Shen Yueji probably noticed her gaze, so she looked back coldly. The woman in red was stunned, and then she smiled. "Ah Shang." The word Shang was soft and gentle, with a charm from the depths of a person's body. Even Shen Yueji, a woman, couldn't help but feel a ripple in her heart and look at her a few more times. The man's handsome face was tense, and he didn't even look at her. Instead, he gently helped Shen Yueji to put on her clothes. Her hands were a little cold after running all the way here. The cold wind in the middle of the night was heavy. He hugged her lovingly, and his movements were very careful. But when he talked to the woman in red, he was extremely impatient and indifferent. "Get lost. You can't forget your old love when you have a new one." Aw Shang, look at me. In terms of appearance, I'm not worse than her, am I? In terms of figure, I'm more exquisite than her. Speaking of this, she turned around boldly in front of the two of them. Then she put her hands on the table, looked at Shin Yueji's cold eyes, and smiled. How long have you known Ah Shang? I'm afraid he didn't tell you about our relationship, did he? I don't know how unforgettable it is. Shin Yueji was not a person who could stand provocation. This woman said these words in front of her, which was undoubtedly provocation. She gave Mo Wushang enough time to explain to her, but he didn't say a word until now. If it was someone else, Shin Yueji would have already lashed out with her whip. But in front of a man, she didn't want to lose her composure. Wasn't it just a man? She and Mo Wushang were just using each other. They hadn't reached the point where they couldn't live without him. In the past, Feng Jiuqing had been so affectionate towards her and was even willing to give up his life for her. In the end, didn't he completely bury himself for his empire? Sending himself to his death. She smiled coldly and pried open the man's fingers one by one. It's getting late. This consort took the liberty to come here and disturb the two of you reminiscing about old times. It's indeed my fault. I'm sorry, I'll be leaving now and won't be coming back again. She got up to leave. In the meantime, the man came over to pull her. Shin Yueji was enraged, and without thinking, she slapped him. This slap was very hard, and when she saw the man's fair face, she immediately revealed 5 finger marks. Chapter 365. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I couldn't sleep at night, and I heard Ji Chu say that you were busy, so I came to see you. I've been out for so long. If the Emperor's people notice something, I'm afraid they will be suspicious. I should go back. She tried to make her face look indifferent. She turned around. Mo Wushang didn't get up to take her hand this time. But when Shin Yueji walked to the door, it was locked from the outside. She couldn't get out even if she wanted to. She turned around and glared at him. What are you doing? He wouldn't let her go. A coquettish fox was seducing him in the room, saying a few provocative words from time to time. The man was indifferent and didn't explain, but he still let her take advantage of him. Seeing her reaction, Mo Wushang's dark eyes flickered, and there was a layer of warmth in them. He is actually. Ah Shang, look at what kind of woman you found. Doesn't the little one know how to bow to the big one? He even dared to hit you. Come, let me take a look. Look at your face. Look at how badly you've beaten him up. The woman in red was so distressed that she wanted to throw herself into his arms. Her tone was sweet and charming. The man's cold eyes suddenly became cold and contracted. Even the aura in the room froze at this moment, as if it wanted to freeze 1 to 3 feet. The woman in red immediately stopped on the spot, not daring to take another step forward. However, her mouth was still unconvinced as she muttered, "What are you doing? You weren't like this in the past." In bed, you. Mo Wushang. This time, Shin Yueji was completely furious. She didn't have a whip in her hand. He should be glad that he didn't carry a whip with him. Otherwise, it wouldn't be his own hand that she used to whip him. She stretched out her foot and kicked the door several times. I said let me out, didn't you hear me? Hurry up and open the door. Her face was dark and cold, and even her tone was full of impatience. If you looked closely, you could see the crystal tears at the corner of her eyes. However, she forced herself to swallow it back. The man got up and strode to her, ignoring her struggle, and held her in his arms. His thin lips pressed against her soft ears, and he gently coaxed her, "Don't cry. Let me go." Shin Yueji struggled hard in his arms. He's a man, not a woman. This sentence caused Shin Yueji to be silent for a long time. Looking at her silence, Mo Wushang knew that she listened to his words. He put his thin lips on her pink neck and kissed it gently. He's just. No wonder you can promise me that I'll be your only woman in the future, in the past and in the present. Mo Wushang, I was wrong about you. So you like men. Pfft. The man in red couldn't help but cover his mouth and burst into laughter. Hearing this laughter, Shin Yueji looked past Mo Wushang's stiff body to look at him. Mo Wushang said that he was a man. Chapter 366. The anger in her heart didn't lessen. Instead, it deepened. If she hadn't pushed the door open, this man would have jumped into her arms. And Mo Wushang didn't reject her. If she hadn't spoken up, perhaps the two of them would have hugged each other. Who knew, in the end, they might have rolled onto the bed together. If you like men, tell me. Why are you pestering me? At least I'm straight. She didn't mind two men liking each other. She just couldn't accept it. To her, Mo Wushang would rather be with a woman than a man. I won't disturb you anymore. It's not what you see. There's nothing going on between us. Mo Wushang felt a headache coming on, especially when he saw Shin Yueji's calm face. Although the anger was gone, her face was still unfamiliar and calm. This made Mo Wushang feel inexplicably anxious. I'm talking to him about something. Can he almost talk about being in your arms and holding you together when we talk about it? Would a normal man call you a shang so intimately when talking about something? The man in red, Mo Wushang, you don't have to explain. I understand. I knew you hated me for so long. You must have some ulterior motive for suddenly being so nice to me. Isn't your motive? The man's voice was low. Shin Yueji's eyes reddened instantly. She stared at him. You're being mean to me. The man choked and softened his tone helplessly. He hugged her and rubbed his chin against her restless head. How can I be mean to you when I can't even wait to love you? Believe me, okay? I really only like you from the beginning. You really only like me. I'm the only woman you like. But you like men. Liking men is different from liking women. The man in red snorted a few times. Hearing him laugh, Shin Yueji couldn't help but stare at him. She narrowed her eyes dangerously. Is it funny? The man in red stopped laughing immediately and said with a serious face, no. In his heart, he silently prayed for his friend of many years. What kind of troublesome daughter-in-law did he find? Look at this wild cat. Not only was it hard to coax, but it was also insatiable. Especially the slap he gave to Mo Wushang without any hesitation, he was still in a daze. Ever since he was young, who dared to hit him? Even those enemies who wished for Mo Wushang to die would not dare to even touch a single strand of his hair, let alone hit him. However, this woman was different. Not only did she hit him, but Mo Wushang did not get angry. Instead, he even had to lower himself to coax her. Not only was it hard to believe, but it was also inconceivable. Hong Fui. Mo Wushang lightly spat out 3 words from his thin lips. When the man in red heard his name, he immediately pricked up his ears, only to see the man lowering his head and explaining to Shin Yueji with a doting expression. He grew up with me. His personality is different from other men. He likes to cause trouble and is flamboyant. Don't lower yourself to his level. There's nothing between me and him. Shin Yueji was quiet for a moment. Then you two stayed in the same room in the middle of the night, and he was already charging at you. Why didn't you dodge? Chapter 367. Mo Wuxiang was the regent of the Feng country. In private, there must be a lot of things that couldn't be said in public. So Xin Yueji didn't ask much. She just listened to his explanation and went out. The man followed her out without hesitation. Why are you here suddenly? If you want to see me, ask someone in your mansion to tell me. It's windy outside. I'll go find you myself. It's nothing. I just suddenly wanted to see you. Now that I've seen you, I should go back. Before she turned around, the man's tall body pulled her into his arms again and hugged her tightly. He hugged himself very tightly, so tightly that there was not a single gap left. What are you doing? Let go of me. I should go back. Xin Yueji felt uncomfortable being hugged so tightly by him. She didn't think about it and tried to break his hand. However, the man directly lifted her chin and kissed her. For a moment, her mouth was filled with the familiar smell of the man. The moment his lips and tongue came in, Xin Yueji opened her mouth subconsciously. He chased after her little tongue playfully and tangled with her. After the kiss, she gasped heavily. Being pulled into the man's arms gently, she heard the man's low laughter. I'm very happy. Xin Yueji's little face was a little red from the kiss. She leaned against his chest. The cold wind couldn't blow in, and the blush on her face didn't go away for a long time. If we encounter such things in the future, can't you explain it to me quickly? You're very happy to see me angry, aren't you? Because he wanted to see her jealous look. It looked very real, but it was very far away from him, like a dream. If he hadn't seen the tears at the corner of her eyes, Mo Wuxiang might have looked at her a little longer. She was angry, which meant that she had him in her heart and cared about him. That was why he wanted to see her angry look more. He wanted to know that he still had a place in her heart. Although it wasn't a deep place, he knew that she was not indifferent to his existence in her heart. At least she would feel uncomfortable when she saw him with other women. Even if he wouldn't be with other women. It's going to be dawn soon. I should go back and pack up a bit. When dawn comes, I'll set off with His Majesty back to the palace. After staying in the man's arms for a while, Xin Yueji leaned against his chest, listening to his strong heartbeat, and spoke in a muffled voice. Actually, she didn't really suspect Mo Wuxiang. It was just that she was a little unhappy at that moment. Now that she knew about it, she was a little depressed that she had lost her composure. I'll send you back, okay? No need. Don't the two of you have something to discuss? I can go back by myself. The man was silent for a while. Hong Fui did have something important to discuss with him. Looking at the little woman in his arms, it was obvious that she did not want him to send her back. He paused for a moment. Should I ask Ji Chu to send you back? Xin Yueji said nothing. The man's voice became gentler. I'm worried about you going back alone. Let him send you. All right. Coming out of the man's embrace, Xin Yueji looked at the man's handsome face and suddenly called his name, Mo Wuxiang. The man lowered his eyes to look at her. Will you use me? I won't. These two words were resolute and decisive. Chapter 368. Then I will go back first. Ji Chu. Yes, master. TSK. This person has gone far. Did his soul follow him? Hong Fui crossed his arms and walked out of the room. He stopped in front of the man and teased him. Mo Wuxiang didn't look at him. Go back. I will not go with you. Hey. Hong Fui squinted his eyes dangerously. Mo Wuxiang, what do you mean? You promised to go back with me. Why should I go back alone? I will not be able to explain to the Empress Dowager. He saw that Mo Wushang was about to leave and quickly walked over to stop him. Mo Wushang, have you forgotten your identity? Have you forgotten your mission? After staying in the Phone Kingdom for so many years, do you really think of yourself as a citizen of the Phone Kingdom? Looking at the man's indifferent black eyes, Hong Fui's face turned cold. Did you fall in love with that woman just now? The answer was non-committal. The man raised his eyebrows. Hong Fui looked at him in disbelief. What about Gu Yuqin? Did you fall in love with Gu Yuqin? No. I know that Gu Yuqin was harmed because of the Empress Dowager. If you didn't leave Feng Nation at that time, perhaps that woman wouldn't have died at all. However, you have to remember that a person with a big goal shouldn't be tied down by love. Wushang, there are millions of people in the North Underworld. Are you going to watch them rely on an environment without a leader? The man didn't speak but walked past him with a cold face. Hong Fui frowned. The Empress Dowager ordered you to leave with me tonight and rush back to the Northern Underworld. Otherwise. He paused for a moment. I know I can't beat you, but I will use all my strength to tie you up and bring you back. If you like that woman just now, I can tie her up for you and bring her back to the North Underworld. You can do whatever you want. Wushang, Gu Yuqin is dead. Now the North Underworld needs you. You have been fighting with the Empress Dowager for so long. It's enough. Don't forget that she is your mother, your biological mother. Don't touch her. If you dare to touch her, I will not let you go easily. After saying this, the man turned around and entered the room. Hong Fui wanted to follow, but just as he was about to step into the room, a strong inner force came from the room, and the door closed with a bang. Fortunately, he reacted in time. He quickly took a few steps back and narrowly avoided getting his nose smashed. The Empress Dowager is your mother. During the time you were away from the Northern Underworld, she has been helping you with the affairs of the palace. The Empress Dowager is old and can't manage much for you. The Northern Underworld is your country. The ministers in the court and the people in the capital are all your people. If you continue to be stubborn like this, when the time comes. I've said it before, in my heart, even the millions of innocent people in the North Underworld. The door was pushed open, revealing the man's handsome and natural facial features. His indifferent aura was daunting. His facial features were perfect and flawless, like a sculpture. His hands were behind his back, and his loose black robe made him look like a statue of a god. He looked at him with disdain and spoke slowly, but it revealed endless determination and undeniability. It can't compare to a single hair of hers. But she's dead. Hong Fui's heart was cold. Even if she was a dead person now, her position in his heart was still so heavy that it had never changed. Chapter 369. Who is that person? He is a friend of Master. Ji Chu drove the carriage. When he heard the woman's questioning voice coming from the carriage, he answered respectfully. Friend? Why don't I know? Ji Chu smiled. Mr. Fui has always been elusive and rarely appears in the capital. He just arrived tonight, so it is normal that Miss Shen has not seen him. He is not from the Phone Kingdom. Ji Chu probably did not expect Shen Yueji to say that he was not from the Phone Kingdom so straightforwardly. He paused and nodded, yes. Where is he from? Ji Chu hesitated. He is from the North Underworld. The North Underworld. The North Underworld, Nanyue, and the Phone Kingdom were known as the three biggest countries in the world. She had heard about the tyrannical nature of the Emperor of Nanyue and his love for beauties. As for the Emperor of the North Underworld, it was said that the Empress Dowager had been managing the court. Some people said that there was no emperor in the North Underworld and the country belonged to the Empress Dowager. Some people said that the Empress Dowager took away the military power of the North Underworld Emperor and imprisoned him in the palace. There were many rumors about the North Underworld in the world, and it was difficult to distinguish the truth from the lies. But it was too far away, and Shin Yueji was not interested in these things, so she only heard some rumors. What is the relationship between your master and the North Underworld? Ji Chu scratched his head awkwardly. Although his master liked Miss Shin very much, but there were some things that he really did not know whether to tell Miss Shin or not. What if he said something that he shouldn't have and harmed his master? Since master likes Miss Shin so much, if Miss Shin has any questions, you can ask master yourself, this subordinate. Yes, I understand. Shin Yueji did not push him too much. She leaned on the soft cushion and put a piece of osmanthus cake into her mouth, but the man named Hong Fui just now is quite good-looking. Ji Chu said. Miss Shen, Mr. Fui's appearance is neither a man nor a woman. How can he be compared to my master? Really? I think that Hong Fui's appearance is not worse than your master. Moreover, he looked much more enthusiastic than Imo Wushang. Shin Yueji's seemingly meaningful words caused Ji Chu's heart to beat wildly. Did Miss Shen have a change of heart after seeing Mr. Fui's appearance? The entire Dark North Kingdom had heard of Hong Fui's looks. The title of the first young master of the North Underworld was naturally Mr. Fui. Moreover, according to Hong Fui's character, if he knew that Miss Shen was interested in him, Ji Chu felt that his hand that was holding the reins was trembling. Miss Shen, did master do something to displease you? Please say it. When we return, this subordinate will tell my master. My master promises to change. It's nothing. I just feel that your master has been hiding too much from me. I'm a narrow-minded person and I can't tolerate anyone lying to me. Furthermore, your master has promised me that he would never hide anything from me. If she hadn't bumped into him tonight, she probably wouldn't have known who Hong Fui was. She also wouldn't have known that Hong Fui was actually in contact with the people of the North Underworld. There are some things that master doesn't want Miss Shen to know for her own good. After all, Miss Shen is a woman. The things about the North Sea and the Phoenix Nation. Chapter 370. Ji Chu subconsciously tightened the reins when he heard the meaning in her words, Miss Shin. Don't worry, I won't think too much. I won't say what I shouldn't say either. After all, what I have in mind is just a guess. Let me down at the inn in front. Master has ordered. It's better for me to send Miss Shin back to the general's residence. Then, Ji Chu urged the horse forward. Shin Yueji frowned. The general's residence is at the corner in front. If I'm in danger, I can just shout and the people in the general's residence will hear me. After all, you're a secret guard of the regent's residence. You're always exposed when you're with the regent. Moreover, the emperor brought a lot of people. Do you want the emperor to suspect me? Ji Chu didn't dare to be stubborn anymore. He stopped the carriage in front of the inn. Miss Shin, please. After getting off the carriage, Shin Yueji glanced at him and nodded. You can go back. Yes. After Ji Chu left, Shin Yueji didn't go back to the general's residence directly. Instead, she looked at the inn in front of her, hesitated for a moment, and then walked in. Because it was the middle of the night and the sky was about to brighten, there were no customers. When she entered, she could only see the flickering candlelight and blurry figures. However, two familiar figures by the window caught her eyes first. She found an inconspicuous place. When the waiter came to greet her, she put a silver ingot on the table and signaled him to be quiet. The waiter happily took the silver and carefully retreated. Father, you've been here for a day. It's time to go back. A handsome man in a white robe was expressionless. His black eyes were locked on the drunk middle-aged man opposite him. He frowned and something flashed across his dark eyes. He grabbed the wine jar. Father is the first-grade prime minister of Phone Country. If you're seen like this, it'll be a scandal. First-grade prime minister. Ha, Gu Wei sneered at himself. Why don't I remember that I'm still the first-grade prime minister of Phone Country? He grabbed the wine jar from Gu Mujue. I'm not going back. Why should I go back? To face your mother's unpleasant face. No matter what I do, I won't be able to enter her eyes. No matter what I do, I'm the selfish one. I'm the cruel one. I'm the one who does everything. Tell me, why is your mother so ruthless? It's been more than 20 years. In these 20 years, I gave her whatever she wanted. Even if she didn't want it, I would try my best to get it for her and personally offer it to her. In the end, she regards it as a treasure, a priceless treasure. Not to mention liking it, even looking at it is an insult to her eyes. I'm in a high position. I'm the first-ranked prime minister of the Phone Nation. What can I not have? Even the current emperor has to give me some face. Which of the officials lower than me doesn't have 3 or 4 wives? What about me? I only guarded her. Even though she was old and faded, I still didn't take a concubine. She, on the other hand, can't wait for me to take concubines. When I don't want them, she drugged me, stripped them naked, and sent them to my bed. Gu Wei was really drunk. In the past, he would never say these things in front of his son. However, this time, he kept talking as if he was pouring out all the grievances and unwillingness in his heart. But just when she walked to the door, the man in front of her was dressed in white, his handsome face indifferent, expressionlessly looking at her. Shin Yueji knew that the pause she felt was not an illusion. He stood there. Although he didn't block her way, when Shin Yueji walked forward, he deliberately moved his feet. His intention was obvious. How much did you hear? Chapter 372. The man's eyes were indifferent without any extra emotion. His short sentence didn't have any emotional fluctuations. She understood that he was talking about what she had heard just now. Shin Yueji took a step back and leaned against the door. She looked at him up and down. What should I say? If I say I didn't hear it, first young Master Gu may not believe me. But if I say I heard it, will first young Master Gu kill me? Speaking of which, it's really quite shocking. No wonder your entire Gu family doesn't like Gu Yuqin. She's a child that Madame Murong had with another man. But since Madame Murong was pregnant with Gu Yuqin first, why does Gu Yuqin call you brother? In terms of age, shouldn't she be a few years older than you? As long as she could remember, Gu Mujue had existed in the Gu family. After hearing what Gu Wei said when he was drunk, Shin Yueji suspected that Gu Mujue was only 1 year older than her. If she was the child of Murong Yun and another man, then what about him? He was also Murong Yun's flesh and blood. He was born 1 year earlier than her. Was he also Gu Wei's child? Seeing the man's cold and lonely lips were almost pressed into a straight line. Shin Yueji smiled slightly. First young Master Gu is angry. Imperial concubine Shin, I hope you can keep this matter in your heart forever. There is no wall in the world that doesn't have a crack. I don't like to keep things in my heart. First young master wants me to keep it in my heart, but I won't let it rot in my heart. Not only that, I will also tell others about it. At that time, the whole capital will be talking about Madame Murong and Prime Minister Gu married. The man interrupted her in a low voice. He clenched his fists under his long sleeves. Yuqin has no grudge against you. If you do this, her reputation will be ruined. A wild girl born by a slut didn't even know who her biological father was. Gu Yuqin had a bad reputation when she was alive. After her death, the rumors about her had died down a lot. If something like this happened to the Gu family at this time, she would be mentioned again. Yuqin. Shin Yueji looked at him amusedly. Was the relationship between the late Empress and young master very good? Why did I hear that when the late Empress was being beaten by Madame Murong's men, you were just watching coldly from the side? Forget about stopping her, you even turned a blind eye when the late Empress asked you for help. What? Now you know how to care for your sister? From the looks of it, the late Empress doesn't seem to be your sister, young master. A chill suddenly burst out from the man's body, wishing that it could freeze people 3 feet. Shin Yueji smiled faintly, showing no signs of weakness. Just based on her status alone, no matter how harsh her words were, even if it didn't reach Gu Mujue's ears, she could be sure that he wouldn't dare to do anything to her. Shin Yueji took a step forward. If it had been anyone else here today, as long as it wasn't me, surely young Master Gu would have already killed her. Gu Mujue didn't say anything. She looked at her with her dark eyes. Your Gu family and my Shin family have always been at odds with each other in the capital. You still want me to help you hide it? She laughed coldly. Young Master Gu, don't you think that's too wishful thinking? Her gaze subconsciously swept towards the wooden fox carving hanging on his waist. Chapter 373. His bloodless thin lips were pursed into a straight line. After a long time, she heard his cold voice. You can state your conditions. Shin Yueji stretched out her white hand. Okay, this is what young master said. Give me the wooden fox in your hand, and I will pretend that nothing happened tonight, and I have not heard anything. She accurately saw the killing intent flashing in the man's eyes. Shin Yueji smiled. What? You are not willing. Gu Mujue clenched the little fox in his hand. Why it? Seeing young Master Gu so nervous, I think this little fox is very important to you. Gold and silver jewelry are rare treasures in the world. According to my identity, I naturally do not lack them. On the contrary, the little fox worn by young Master Gu's waist is very attractive to me. I just don't know how sincere young Master Gu is. Young Master Gu. Shin Yueji suddenly approached him. In an instant, his nose was filled with the fresh fragrance of a young girl. The man frowned. Shin Yueji stood on tiptoe and blew hot air into his ear. It was ticklish and numb, with a giggle. I kindly remind young Master Gu that the Emperor returned to the capital this time and brought back a monk. It seems that intentionally or unintentionally, he wants to replace your Gu family's position in the court. What did you say? Shin Yueji shrugged slightly. How can you and I, an imperial concubine and a minister, see through the Emperor's mind? Now, the Gu and Shin families are like the sun in the sky in the capital. The Emperor is afraid, so he wants to get rid of them. Young Master Gu is a smart man. Sometimes, just by looking at a person, he can see their thoughts and thoughts. As for the Emperor, you have followed him for so many years, it seems that you should understand him a little bit. Imperial concubine Shin told me this. Aren't you afraid that I will expose you to the Emperor? You won't. Shin Yueji's bright eyes flickered a few times. If it was anyone in your Gu family, but young Master Gu, you won't. I can see that you seem to dislike the Emperor very much. She already knew that Gu Mujue did not like Feng Jiuqing. On the surface, he was still respectful, but in reality, every time they met, the respect in his eyes did not reach the depths of his eyes. Instead, there was a layer of coldness. Even yesterday at the general's mansion, after Feng Jiuqing appeared, he did not say a word. His dark eyes seemed to be covered with a layer of frost. In the past, Shin Yueji did not understand why Gu Mujue hated Feng Jiuqing so much. After she married Feng Jiuqing, she hated him for a long time because of Gu Mujue's dislike of Feng Jiuqing. Now, when she looked at him again, she didn't find him so annoying. Really? The corners of the man's lips lifted and he sneered. Although I don't like your Goo family, eldest young master is much better than those unreasonable people in the Goo family. That's why I'm still willing to talk to eldest young master. Why do you think the emperor's thoughts are so hard to understand? The important ministers of the two families are willing to sacrifice their lives for him. Their loyalty is so great that they want to dig out their hearts and show it to him. He, on the other hand, is still blindly suspicious and jealous, and even wants to get rid of him. By doing so, who knows how many officials' hearts have turned cold. Chapter 374. Young Master Goo, don't be so direct. This is not a cooperative relationship. I mean to protect our Shin family and the Goo family. What does the life and death of the Goo family have to do with me? The cold and decisive words made the smile on Shin Yueji's face freeze for a moment. What did Goo Mujue mean? Was he not a member of the Goo family? It was as if he saw the surprise on her face that she did not have time to hide. The man put one hand behind his back and stared at her for a while. If it is a cooperative relationship between us, I can consider it. If it is for the sake of the Goo and Shin families, then there is no need to mention it. Compared to the Goo and Shin families, Shin Yueji actually hoped to cooperate alone. In this way, the Shin family would not be involved and would not face danger. However, Goo Mujue's indifference to the Goo family's life and death was somewhat unexpected. However, knowing his character, Shin Yueji didn't press him further. For Goo Mujue, she still had some trust in him. He was different from those people in the Goo family who went back on their words. As long as he promised, he would definitely do it. He would never go back on his word, even if they were on opposite sides. Shin Yueji suddenly pulled her lips and smiled. Well, since young Master Goo is so straightforward, then it is a personal cooperation between us. It has nothing to do with the Goo and Shin families. I just don't know. She paused. When the time comes, will young Master Goo deliberately take sides? I will do what I say. Since I have promised young Master Shin, I will not go back on my word. I know what Imperial Consort wants. Perhaps Imperial Consort doesn't know what I want now, but sooner or later, you'll know. Goo Mujue was indifferent. Shin Yueji really did not know what he wanted. He said he wanted the throne, but he was so indifferent to it. He said he wanted something else, but according to his status, what could he not have? However, the fact that he agreed to cooperate with her so readily meant that Shin Yueji smiled slightly. At that time, if Prime Minister Goo wants to do anything to the Shin family, I hope young Master Goo can inform me. As long as the Shin family is honest, the Goo family will not do anything. Young Master Goo, what benefits do you want from me? Just say it. You only need to inform me of His Majesty's movements. You don't need to do anything else. Actually, young Master has found the wrong person regarding the Emperor's movements. I think that the Empress should be the clearest about it. If young Master wants to know about the Emperor's movements, when she saw the man's handsome brows, she suddenly narrowed her eyes, as if she was impatient. Shin Yueji nodded. All right. He returned from the inn. It was already dawn. Shin Yueji thought about it along the way. Why did she suddenly cooperate with Goo Mujue? It was completely subconscious. She couldn't fight against Feng Zhiqing by herself. Moreover, Mo Wuxiang was hiding something from her. He probably had a lot of things to do as well. She didn't want to disturb him at this time and distract him. In addition, Feng Zhiqing wanted to get rid of the Goo and Shin clans. The Goo clan was extremely loyal, and if Feng Zhiqing did not reveal his true colors, they would not believe him at all. However, Feng Zhiqing was the kind of person who, even if you were dead, would still think that he was a good person, a sage. She took a deep breath and recalled what Gu Mujue had said to her before she left. Sometimes, if necessary, she really needed to cooperate with Gu Mujue. Chapter 375. She said that she wanted to cooperate with him, but secretly, she just wanted to destroy them. And Gu Mujue seemed to have seen through her mind. He had purposely left the Gu family out of the picture, as if he would ignore her no matter what she wanted to do. "Where did you go?" The man's gentle voice, with a trace of hoarseness, was just waking up. Hearing this familiar voice, Shin Yueji suddenly turned her head. Feng Jiuqing came out with only a piece of clothing, and his hair was not tied up, a little messy. His fair face in the hazy sky had a different kind of beauty. His black eyes were as gentle as ever, and at this moment, he was looking at her gently. Shin Yueji lowered her head subconsciously. "I couldn't sleep, so I got up and strolled in the yard." Speaking of this, she thought of something and hurriedly added, "I didn't eat much last night, so I was suddenly hungry. I originally planned to go to the kitchen to get something to eat, but found that the servants were all asleep, so I planned to go out to buy something alone, but I didn't expect that the shops were closed, so I sat in an inn for a while." She explained everything that needed to be explained in one breath. She accurately saw the man's gentle eyebrows shake, and suddenly looked at her with a low smile. Why does Imperial Concubine's eagerness to explain give me the illusion that there is a ghost in her heart? This concubine is just being honest. If I had known this, I wouldn't have slept with father and mother. At such an old age, you are still so kind. Shin Yueji stopped talking in time, covered her mouth, blushed, and secretly looked at the young emperor who was staring at her. "Your Majesty, you woke up so early, are you going to return to the palace now?" "I suddenly woke up, and saw that the sky was a little brighter, so I came out to have a look." "So your Majesty is the same as this concubine?" Shin Yueji stepped forward, walked in front of him, and pulled his wide sleeve. "Your Majesty, it's cold outside, let's hurry into the room, what if you get a cold?" Feng Jiuqing let her pull him. After taking a few steps, the man suddenly grabbed her hand and interlocked his fingers with hers. "I had wanted Imperial Consort to stay in the manor for a few more days, but Zhen has been away from the palace for so long, and there are a lot of trivial matters in the court that Zhen has to deal with. Your Majesty, this concubine understands. As the Emperor of Feng Country, Your Majesty is always busy with official business. Your Majesty has already given this concubine a few days to accompany father and mother. This concubine is already very satisfied." She leaned on the man's shoulder, her small face slightly red. "Your Majesty treats this subject's concubine well, this subject's concubine knows. Your Majesty does not need to blame yourself." The man pinched her nose and said, "It's good that you know it. I really don't want to make you feel wronged." The man's palm was dry and warm. When his smooth fingers pinched her nose, his movements were extremely gentle, as if he was afraid of hurting her. She followed him back to the house. Shin Yueji poured him a cup of water. "Emperor, this concubine saw the monk you brought back last night." "Oh." The movement of the man's hand paused, and then he took the tea that she handed him as if nothing had happened just now. "Did the Imperial concubine see him?" Chapter 376. The man smiled and put down the teacup in his hand. In recent days, the rumors about the late Empress have been spreading in the court. I need to ask Master Kong Yin to do a ceremony. When he mentioned Gu Yuqin, she could see the obvious pain in his eyes. It appeared quickly and disappeared quickly as well. It was fleeting. In Shin Yueji's words, it was just right. Shin Yueji restrained the obscurity in her eyes. Didn't His Majesty say that he doesn't believe in these nonsense? Why? Asking Kong Yin is just an explanation to the people in the palace. The man took a sip of tea. It's dawn. Does Imperial Consort have anything to say to General Shin and Shinfuren? She knew that Feng Jiuqing was giving her a chance to say goodbye to Shin He and Shin Qiu. She hesitated for a moment but still nodded. Father and mother know that His Majesty is going back to the palace today. I will go and remind them. N. After leaving the room, Shin Yueji went all the way to Shin Qiu's room. She saw that both of them were dressed neatly, especially Shin He, who looked high-spirited. She frowned with some dissatisfaction. Father, did you forget that you are sick? How can His Majesty think that you are really sick when you look like this? That's right. It's all your fault. I almost forgot about it. Shin Qiu had been well nourished last night and almost forgot that Shin He's attire was too incompatible. She ordered him to lie on the bed again. Shin He looked at them worriedly. Daughter, His Majesty is going back to the palace. Do you think His Majesty will be angry if Father lies down like this? No, His Majesty knows that Father is sick, so he doesn't need to get up to send him off. His Majesty asked me to come here to inform Father and Mother that there is no need to follow so many rules. His Majesty is going out incognito, so he should go back incognito. Shin Qiu understood her words. All right, Mother understands. Must be very careful when you go back. This time you are going out with His Majesty. I don't know how that little girl of the Gu family will bear a grudge against you. You must be more vigilant. If you can't handle it, close the palace and wait for Father and Mother to rush to save you. Mother Shin's love, whether it was in her heart or in her eyes, was undisguised. Shin Yueji's heart softens. She looks at her mother and smiles. Mother, don't worry. Your daughter will be fine. Not only your daughter, but also the Shin family. As long as your daughter is alive, the Shin family will never fall. Shin He wiped his tears in relief. Even after she had walked far away, his tears still hadn't stopped. Shin Qiu sat on the bed and looked at the man who usually shed blood on the battlefield without shedding tears. It's all our fault for protecting too well. I don't know what kind of grievances she suffered in the palace, but she suddenly grew up. She felt gratified and sad at the same time. Tell me, what is thinking? I can clearly feel that her dependence on the regent is much deeper than that of the emperor. Why does she still want to enter the palace? Isn't it better to stay at home when you marry the prince regent? What do you know? Our daughter is eating from the bowl while looking at the pot. You have to choose a man like this. You have to try for a long time to see which one is good and which one is suitable. Hearing this, Shin Qiu couldn't help but glare at him. You talk too much. Every day you talk about your big principles. I don't know what kind of nonsense you are talking about. Whether it was a beautiful girl or a married woman, his gaze would never make people feel rushed. How could Feng Jiuqing not understand her intentions when faced with her words that had a hidden meaning? He chuckled in a low voice. When did the concubine become as considerate as the empress? Recruiting for the emperor's harem was usually something only the empress would do. Gu Yueyin was clearly disgusted by this rule, but she still had to pretend to be magnanimous as she recruited for Feng Jiuqing's harem, taking in all the beautiful women in the world. Chapter 378. If your majesty likes it, this concubine, as an imperial concubine, has to do something. Otherwise, your majesty will subconsciously compare this concubine with empress sister and feel that this concubine is not as generous and narrow-minded as empress sister. When did Jin say that? The man slightly raised his eyebrows, and his eyes had already moved away from Li Yingying's charming and pretty face. It fell on Shin Yueji's serious little face. Your majesty, there is an ambush. However, not long after his eyes fell on Shin Yueji's face, the reins of the carriage were suddenly tightened. The horse raised its head and roared, and the carriage shook violently. Li Yingying sat below. After all, she was a weak woman, not like Shen Yueji, who came from a family of generals. When the carriage shook violently, her center of gravity was unstable. She didn't know what to hold, and her body subconsciously fell towards Feng Jiuqing. "Your Majesty," she exclaimed. The man frowned. One of his hands was holding on to Shen Yueji. The moment he saw her soft body pouncing towards him, his dark eyes wavered. He did not push her away, nor did he take the initiative to reach out to help her. Shen Yueji looked at the man's invisible unfamiliar scene, and the corner of her lips slightly raised. Yes, this was the real Feng Jiuqing. To him, Li Yingying was just a stranger. She had no illustrious identity or background, and all she had was a face that was somewhat similar to hers. If Feng Jiuqing was willing to hold her, it meant that he still had some feelings for her, but he not only didn't, but also waited for her to fall. It was enough to show that the manly demeanor he should have made him unable to push her away. Li Yingying had no background to rely on, so he was too lazy to pay attention to her, even if she had a face that was somewhat similar to his, but for Feng Jiuqing, this was a woman without feelings, even if they had the same face, so what? He could still be so indifferent. Li Yingying was afraid of such a scene. The moment she fell into Feng Jiuqing's arms, she subconsciously hugged the man's waist, and her whole face was buried deep in the man's chest. "Your Majesty. Your Majesty." Her voice was soft, trembling, and there was still fear after the shock. The soft and fragrant jade in his arms made the man frown, but he symbolically held her slender waist and comforted her. "It's okay." He pushed Li Yingying, who was in his arms, to Shen Yueji beside him and got off the carriage alone. "Your Majesty, be careful." Shen Yueji couldn't help but remind him as she watched him get off the carriage. Feng Jiuqing turned around and looked at her. He smiled and nodded slightly in response. This place was Heartbroken Cliff. In the past, it had deepened her feelings for Feng Jiuqing to the point where she had no regrets. The scene from her previous life was about to repeat itself. Even her grip on Li Yingying's arm tightened. Previously, Li Yingying was acting when the horse was frightened. But this time, her hand was really hurting from Shen Yueji's grip. Shen Yueji's grip was really tight and her long nails were digging deep into her flesh. She frowned in pain and said, "Your Highness, did I make you unhappy just now?" Hearing this, Shen Yueji released her. Seeing that the woman was in so much pain that the color of her pretty little face had almost changed, she seemed to have reacted, and with some guilt, she loosened the shackles on her. "Sorry, I lost control of myself for a moment. Did I hurt you?"